Well, hello everyone. As we get ready for a 2024, thought would spend a few moments reflecting upon trends in clinical AI this past year, somewhat triggered by the RSNA last month. And as mentioned in some of our blogging, did want to do some more deeper discovery there and reflections. So we're going to do a couple of little, hopefully short videos about takeaways and some of the trends. One of them today being on evidence and increasing veracity of it for clinical AI applications. Second one on the trends in opportunistic screening. And then thirdly, some of the realities. So at this year's RSNA, like in the past years, we have seen throughout the program, both in the scientific session and in educational sessions, a lot of discussion and presentation of results from prospective and sometimes even randomized trials that were designed intentionally to evaluate clinical AI, in the case of the RSNA, diagnostic imaging applications, intended to make some difference and impact for the reader or the clinical team's daily tasks. I think this is best exemplified and typified by the progress that we're seeing in the breast imaging community. Breast AI or breast CAD 2.0 has been the most mature in terms of adoption in the market and in terms of clinical studies that have been funded and done. And on the first day of RSNA, a very excellent session chaired by Dr. Connie Lieben, reviewed the state-of-the-art results. Frederick Strachan from Karolinska did an excellent job of commenting on the three prospective large studies that have been published recently in Lancet Oncology, in Nature Digital Medicine, and in Lancet itself, evaluating AI's ability in mammography and diagnostic mammography to make some improvements in the way that the process occurs, giving confidence to the radiologists that they are making the better decision, the right decision, without impacting their accuracy and making them more efficient. And each of those three studies had slightly different outcomes and different goals, but they did convincingly demonstrate that there is definitely some signal out there that using clinical AI in these clinical tasks are making some differences and making some impacts. I won't go too deep because these studies have been well commented on and presented otherwise, but it is telling because one of the criticisms that I hear often from not necessarily the imaging community, but from more medical and more broad, is that there's just no good evidence out there. There's no good studies. Even what the FDA requires of diagnostic imaging AI is lackadaisical. And so I guess my point being, and one of the trends that we saw at the RSNA and continuing in the literature is the development and the dissemination of convincing prospective studies. I will share at some point, I have a PubMed search that looks at the trends in prospective and clinical AI publications, and it has definitely been increasing year over year at the rate that you would expect an early technology that is being adopted to take on. So I think, so one of the summaries and takeaways from that opening session and then what I heard throughout the rest of the conference when there was discussion of these prospective studies is that we are starting to show and demonstrate that there is real utility in these applications. There are always struggles and difficulties in designing these types of studies, which is a problem for diagnostic testing in general, for doing any kind of statistical design for a diagnostic, whether it's imaging or lab medicine, is that the true clinical outcome, which we're all interested in demonstrating, that is affected by so many more decisions that are made than just the diagnostic test. So it is very difficult sometimes to tease out what that impact is of, say, in this case, an AI being used in the screening portion of breast cancer pathway. But nonetheless, studies that do focus on changing or seeing how the AI can affect change in a physician's behavior is what we are seeing. And by the way, the FDA and their guidance and what manufacturers need to do when seeking clearance for a computer-aided diagnostic or decision type of product is you need to design a study where you're showing how is this AI affecting the reader or the clinical task of the clinician, and what does that change in their behavior? Again, usually we're using, because these are diagnostic tasks, some analog, which is the detection of some tumor or some lesion as the outcome. But nonetheless, the focus of this from regulators, and also seeing the literature, is how are the humans being impacted and changed. So despite the limitations of these types of studies, and observer studies in general, and reader studies having the limitations, we are seeing that there is adoption. Frederick Strand also did some very nice pointing out too during that session of the importance of understanding that all these AI techniques that we are using are statistical in nature, probabilistic, and this has an implication in how you decide to evaluate and use and then continuously monitor these different AI tools. For instance, one of the critical parameters in deploying both in a study and in clinical practice these breast AI tools is at what threshold, what probability threshold do you say that, okay, we want the AI model's output to be above a threshold that is going to trigger either the message that, hey, we should do a recall on this woman, or we don't need to. That setting is a statistical parameter and is going to vary, and evidence shows this, that where you set that threshold is a function of the type of scanner, the manufacturers, the patient populations, and even in prospective literature, if you see a threshold that was set for that study, in your own practice, that may be a very different type of threshold that you want to establish. And this is going to vary over time. So this underscores this critical need to understand ongoing performance and understanding of these AI tools and any data-driven innovation, predictive or not, in your practice. And the other important piece also, which is always talked about, is how do these things integrate into the point of care or the point of diagnosis? And this puts a lot of emphasis, because one of the big fallouts from the first use of breast CAD and lung CAD in the community in the 90s and early 2000s was that they were very rigid, fire and forget, if you will, type of applications where they made notes and burned things into images. So now today's technology gives us better capabilities and flexibility. However, how you decide to deploy that is a function of a lot of factors, sometimes out of the hands of the physicians, related to IT and to care pathways. So a lot of attention needs to be paid on how you integrate these also into your day-to-day and at that point of need. So I think, though, from the sessions that on these evidence, the most telling, or I think the take-home point, was a comment that a community physician made in the audience at the end of Dr. Lehman's session on Sunday, was him recounting his own experience in his practice. He said, look, I was an early advocate for these AI tools and breast imaging. I went through all of these struggles of trying to pick the right parameters, evaluate the different vendors, look at what was going to work. And it was painful and it took time. And now we're learning, right? And so his point was sessions like the RSNA and SIM and ACR, these will help the community. But his takeaway message was, though, at the end of the day, despite all that work and that effort, when I'm reading a difficult case and I'm struggling to really make a definitive diagnosis or an interpretation, having this second set, this computer friend almost, helping me gives me a lot of confidence. And having the safety net, which is one of these key use cases of the breast AI, really gives that physician some more certainty, and which helps improve the quality of healthcare overall.